Can the Kentucky Derby winner do it again? Let's talk about Sovereignty's chances to win the Belmont Stakes. Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to another Belmont Stakes Contender Spotlight Series. This one is on your Kentucky Derby winner, Sovereignty. Now, before we get to this very impressive runner for Bill Mott and Godolphin, want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, weekly programs, and so much more. We got you covered for the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival, the summer at Saratoga, Keeneland in the fall, the Breeders' Cup. We got you covered all year round, so make sure to press that like and subscribe button right away. Additionally, want to remind you that if you are not yet a player on NYRA Bets, we have a great promotion leading up to the Belmont Stakes. If you use the promo code Belmont25, you get up to a $200 deposit match bonus and a free $25 bet added to your account. So use that promo code Belmont25 today. All right. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit about Sovereignty, the winner of the Kentucky Derby, a horse that so many anointed as special, even going back to his 2-year-old campaign. Certainly that impressive victory in the street sense at Churchill Downs last year was a real coming out party for him in a lot of ways. A dominating victory over two horses who went on to win big races of their own. Tistastic finishing second that day, goes on to win the Louisiana Derby, and Sandman, who finishes third that day, comes back to win the Arkansas Derby, finished third in the Preakness just recently. So beat some outstanding horses as a 2-year-old and comes back and obviously establishes himself as a top contender going into Churchill Downs, and then a brilliant ride by Junior Alvarado and just an incredible stretch run there in the Kentucky Derby. But Bill Mott and Godolphin made the decision. We're skipping the Preakness, no Triple Crown on the line. A lot of people had opinions about that one way or the other. Do we need to change the Triple Crown? Do we need to change the date of the Preakness? Do we need to change the way we're breeding horses? Those are discussions for another day, my friends. The bottom line is he skipped and he's going to Saratoga, and now the face-off is set between him and journalism. Journalism did his end of the deal. After finishing second in the Kentucky Derby, he comes back to win the Preakness. He's going to the Belmont, and so now you get the showdown between your Derby winner and your Preakness winner. And oh, by the way, the Preakness winner was a runner-up by a short distance to Sovereignty in that Kentucky Derby. Now, remember, that Derby was run over a wet track, so this might be a first opportunity for us to see the two of them face each other over a fast track, and maybe that is a little bit of a difference. We'll just have to wait and see, though both horses are bred fantastically to handle wet track. So I don't think that was a huge issue. Both horses look like they handled the slop very, very well in that race. So I don't think that was a defining issue by any stretch between these two. But Sovereignty, listen, let's talk about him, because he is, like I said, an incredibly impressive horse trained by Bill Mott, who had won the Kentucky Derby before, but it was via disqualification with Country House. You could certainly see in the aftermath of that Derby what it meant for him to have a horse that crossed the wire first. It really kind of felt like a first Kentucky Derby win for him after a long and illustrious career. He just got a first Whitney win, if I'm not mistaken, last year with Arthur's Ride. So it's been a big couple of months and year really for Bill Mott. Junior Alvarado, brilliant ride in my opinion. You have a horse who's a closer. And one of the things that Junior did so well was he kind of got after Sovereignty a little bit to get him to move into that ideal position. And he had his eye on journalism the whole time. He knew who his top competition was. And when journalism started to make his move, Sovereignty was only 2 or 3 lengths behind him. And if you're journalism, you got to give yourself a little bit more cushion than that if you're going to hold off Sovereignty. And Sovereignty just went right by journalism in the stretch of that race. It looks so impressive. And again, this was a horse that when you talk to people on the backstretch, when you talk to analysts, when you talk to people who are around horses, they all told you this is a horse that is a physical specimen that everybody said had big things and a big future plan. I remember talking to Acacia Clement and Paul LaDuca about Sovereignty way back in January, February. And I remember Paul said, if you put a gun to my head today and asked me to pick a Kentucky Derby winner, it was going to be Sovereignty. That was 3 months before the Kentucky Derby. So there was a lot of hype around this horse early on. Like I said, bred by Godolphin. Godolphin, the biggest organization in horse racing by far, is, finally gets their first Kentucky Derby victory. Now is pointing this horse to the Belmont Stakes. Obviously, the goal is the Travers after that, the Breeders' Cup Classic after that, overseas potentially after that as a 4-year-old. So we'll have to wait and see. But it is going to be a great showdown between these horses. But let's talk about Sovereignty's pedigree a little bit. Sired by Into Mischief out of Crowned, who's a Bernardini mare. We talk a lot about Into Mischiefs. He now has produced 3 Kentucky Derby winners, and one of his offspring, Golden Sense, has produced a Kentucky Derby winner in the form of Mystic Dan. So I do think sometimes, listen, I can be guilty of this as well. When I see it Into Mischief, a lot of times I go, I don't know if we're going to get this distance, because Into Mischief on his own gets you a mile and an eighth, maybe. The Bernardini influence underneath shows you the importance of dam side pedigree. And that's something you always need to be paying attention to, because that gives you the distance and that gives you the foundation to be able to feel confident with a horse like Sovereignty to get the mile and a quarter, which he clearly did with ease in the Kentucky Derby. So Into Mischief on its own is not a sire I necessarily trust going a classic distance if you just give me a run-of-the-mill broodmare sire underneath. But if you give me a Bernardini underneath, then yes, there's, if you give me a Curlin underneath, if you give me a Tappet underneath, then you start to see, yes, those Into Mischiefs can get longer. So, horse that has great pedigree, has a wonderful running style coming from off the pace. We're going to talk about some of the challenges of that potentially in a 6-horse field, but really, again, hasn't run many bad races. Won the Kentucky Derby, won the Fountain of Youth, won the Street Sense as a 2-year-old, did finish second at Tapan Street in that Florida Derby as his final prep. But otherwise, like I said, really has not run poorly. Did race once up at Saratoga, debuted at Saratoga last year, actually, finished 4th in a maiden special weight race. But that was a pretty good maiden special weight race. That was Tip Top Thomas won that race. That horse is pointed to some bigger races, potentially the Woody Stevens. We'll see. But that horse, I think, has a bright future sprinting. You got a horse like Rookie Card, who went on to be a decent enough horse, and Key Waden, who showed some promise as well. And ultimately, when did Sovereignty start doing his best? When they started stretching out to 2 turns, when he started going a little bit longer. So he has some experience over the track. Obviously, he's been up there since the end of, right after the Kentucky Derby. So he's been used to Saratoga. He's more than acclimated to the surroundings. Now, when you look at his running style, this is, I think, going to be the big question, which is how close can you be to the front? And you see that second career start going a mile at Belmont at the Big A back last September, he showed he can have some tactical speed. That was a 6-horse field, and he sat 3rd and nearly beat a horse, Prater, who's a pretty nice horse for Chad Brown. And so finished 2nd that day. He can sit a little closer, but if you look at his other running lines, he prefers to sit well off the pace. Now, that Florida Derby, he sat more of a mid-pack trip, and I think that might be kind of beneficial. The key for Junior Alvarado is this is a 6-horse race. You have one horse that represents speed in the Belmont in all likelihood, which is Rodriguez. Now, if Rodriguez is your only speed, and again, at the time that I'm recording this, it looks that way, but maybe another horse like a Crudo is entered. That might change some dynamics a little bit, okay? So maybe there's another speed horse that's entered in the race. That changes things up a little bit. But as of right now, it is Rodriguez who is your lone speed. Now, a horse like Baeza can certainly maybe track that pace. I don't know if Baeza is necessarily a stalker in that regard, but I think he'll be put into that 2nd position. Journalism is going to be sitting 3rd or 2nd, depending on the draw and kind of how cleanly he gets away and kind of the tactics between him and Baeza. But those two will be sitting kind of 2nd, 3rd. And then you have horses like Heart of Honor and Hill Road, Hill Road is absolutely a closer. And then Heart of Honor is a horse that probably has better speed than he realizes, but just always gives himself trouble at the gate. Comes out a little slow, can kind of be a little raucous in the gate, so and a little fractious. So that's something to keep in mind. But Sovereignty certainly does not want to spot the leaders a significant amount of ground in a 6-horse race if there's not going to be any sort of contested pace. Now, does he need pace? No. Go back and look at that Fountain of Youth. Those are, good fractions, but not blistering fractions for Gulfstream Park standards. And he had the short stretch to deal with, and he still managed to track down River Thames on the lead. So he doesn't need pace, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have some pace. But the more important thing is, even if you don't have pace, you don't want to spot everybody a significant distance. So it really is going to come down to how close are you going to be from the back of the pack? How compact is this field going to be, or how strung out is this field going to be? How easy does Rodriguez get to the front end? How uncontested is that lead? Those are all questions to consider. How close is journalism and Baeza to the front? How many lengths are you giving up to those horses? When do you have to start making your move? These are all calculations Junior Alvarado has to make. But listen, it's going to be a short field or a shorter field. People who talk about the short fields, apparently nobody's ever watched the 1973 Belmont. I don't know. It's like the most watched race on YouTube. But there are only 5 horses that day that Secretariat ran. He only ran against 4 others. Not about necessarily having the biggest field. It's about having the best field. And it's hard to argue that this is not the best field in terms of a collection of 3-year-olds, because you have the Derby winner, the Preakness winner, and you have the Derby third place finisher, Baeza, who's an outstanding horse. So then you throw in a horse that was a Wood Memorial winner like Rodriguez. You throw in a horse, the Peter Pan winner like Hill Road. It's a really nice field. So, but it's not a big field. And again, that might present some tactical issues. One of the things you do have to like, though, when you look at his running lines is just a steady progression from Sovereignty. And the question is, have we even seen his best? Was the 104 at the Kentucky Derby even his best effort? Could he get even faster? He's going to have an advantage over journalism in that he's a little fresher than journalism is. Obviously, journalism running that very thrilling race in the Preakness, but having to exert himself and go all out to track Oscar and win that race. Sovereignty was hanging out up in Saratoga and training. According to Bill Mott, he looks even better training. He looks bigger. He looks stronger. He looks more menacing. Somebody who has my Twitter handle loves that sort of a thing. I fail to menace, but that's not Sovereignty's problem. So he looks even bigger and better. And that's something which may not really be that surprising. Sometimes horses, when they start to progress like this, they can run big races and they come back even better and stronger than they were in their previous starts. And remember, these are still 3-year-olds. They're still growing. They're still developing. Sovereignty knows he won a big race. And again, that chest puffs out a little bit. He puffs up a little bit when he gets onto the track. You watch the clips of him working out next to Arthur's Ride. That's not a slouch of a horse. That's a grade 1 winning horse. And he's only working himself back into shape after a long layoff, but still Sovereignty just absolutely put him away. And it's impressive to see him work that way against an older horse who's a grade 1 winning older horse. So again, not a lot you can poke holes in with Sovereignty. The question that you have as a bettor is always going to be, at what price do you feel comfortable taking this horse relative to your opinion on his chances of winning the race? If you think he can win the race 50% of the time, then you're probably pretty comfortable taking, 6-5 on him, because that's technically good value. So it is a matter of your opinion of him, his ability to win the race, and what odds he's going to be at. Having journalism in here is going to help his value a little bit, because I think it's going to be a 1A, 1B situation. One's going to be 9-5, one's going to be 8-5, or one's going to be 9-5, one's going to be 2-1. They're going to be very close to each other. You have Baeza in here, that's going to help things. You have a Bob Baffert horse in Rodriguez, that's going to help things. So you have horses in here that are going to attract some money and interest from the betting public. That's going to help give you at least a little bit of better odds on a horse like Sovereignty, despite it being a shorter field. But this is a horse that really hasn't run a bad race, certainly hasn't run a bad race since breaking his maiden, and has shown the ability to overcome a short stretch, paceless races, sloppy conditions. So no matter what the weather is, he can handle it. No matter what the pace is, he can handle it. And no matter what the configuration is, he can handle it. He's already done a 1.25 miles. He can certainly do it again. So I think the question that we also have, which is maybe the final question I'll leave you all with today, how does the track play at Saratoga? That's a big question mark, because if the track is speed favoring, then it puts a horse like Sovereignty and Hill Road and Heart of Honor at a little bit of a disadvantage, because those horses are going to be coming from off the pace. Last year, Dornoch basically took him gate to wire in the Belmont Stakes. That has traditionally not been a winning recipe when you're going 1.5 miles, but we're not going 1.5 miles, are we? We're going 1.25 miles. So that changes the dynamics of the race and the way that Saratoga's track is playing early in the week. It's going to be important to watch those races on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday and see how track conditions are, obviously paying attention to any potential weather that's in the area and how that could impact track bias, etc. So a lot of things to keep in mind, but Sovereignty, my Lord, what an impressive horse, and is going to be fresh coming in from that Kentucky Derby victory. All right. Well, friends, I'm going to stop there today. Remind you again to press that like and subscribe button on NYRA Bets YouTube. And remember to use promo code Belmont25 for signing up on NYRA Bets, getting that $200 match bonus and a free $25 bet. All right. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.